No, we've had great discussion in these, and thank you guys for coming. They really have been very well attended, and so this is the last of the bunch, and by now I've got the speech down pretty well. So let's see how well we do. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks that this is a night that we can gather together and talk about the church that you give us the opportunity through which to serve you and to be a part of the work of your hands. We pray, Lord, that we will see your guidance clearly, that we will see the light of the path that you give to us, and we will truly be your disciples. And we pray this in the name of Christ. Amen. All right, so what we've been talking about is the things that we really feel like have been going well in the church, things that we need to be working on and how we're working on those. We've been talking about this whole plan, which I'll be talking with you about a lot, and then we'll talk a little bit about the finances and where we are as we're a couple of weeks till the end of the year, and where we are on the campaign and so forth. So we'll get moving on all of that. The thing that I continue to be amazed at how well this church does is missions, and that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but all of the missions that we do are continually growing. It's amazing. If we start something, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. If it's something that we've continued, it gets bigger. Even things like Be Our Guest that took a hit because of the kitchen, it's getting bigger and bigger again. Before the kitchen went under, we had just hit the most people we'd ever had, and it was right around 200 for a Thanksgiving meal, and we were up 150 something at the last one. So we're creeping back up to get there. So that's terrific. We've had so many different things that have happened that have been positive. One of the things, since Dick's here, I'll let him tell you his story about going to the slab on Thanksgiving.
Susie cooked a 20-pound turkey, and then we went to the slab to...
You weigh a little more than 20 pounds, don't you? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm less now.
Yeah.
So we went to the slab to serve Thanksgiving dinner. Before the serving began, Cheryl, the pastor, went around the room asking all the volunteers how many times they've served and what church they're from. And Susie and I started counting. In fact, a number of other people had too, and more than half were from our church.
So it's amazing. We find that over and over again. And as Dick said, he was so proud of seeing that the church does so much in so many different areas. And one of the things that I'm interested in as I see myself and how I react to churches, that I've served over the years have all wanted to call themselves the community church. That, it's just something that you do. But this is honestly the first one that I could ever say that this is the community church. This is the one that the city staff comes to. This is the one that the city government looks toward. This is the one that other churches look toward to lead them in different things. Just like something Carolyn's involved in. Carolyn Ann is involved with Connect. Connect was one of those things that was created out of this church, became a part of the community, and is now a vital part of what's going on in the school system and in a lot of the nonprofit groups around town. So it's terrific to see those kinds of things, and we want to do that more and more and more. Those are the things that I think that we're called to do, and I would tell you, from my perspective, I think we ought never to leave this spot. I think that this is where this church serves best. We are in downtown Grapevine, and I just think that's where we belong. That's I think that defines who we are a lot. So I would hope we would never leave. And I know that there was a decision, I don't know, how long ago was that? Anybody know how long ago it was that the church actually made the decision not to buy property out in the suburbs somewhere?
It was over 10 years ago. There was another vision meeting before they built the sanctuary here, and that was part of a long-term plan, and they decided to stay downtown.
So that may have been like since the sanctuary is 11 years old,
Yeah,
it's probably
that's
15
what
years ago. Or
Yeah,
something.
it was
Yeah.
15 years ago or so, but it was before the sanctuary.
Right. Well, I think that was a wise decision. I've been in one other church that made that same decision, and that was First Methodist in Denton, and it's now the only church downtown. And so it's really important that I think some church makes that decision. Now, First Baptist Church is selling their property that's out there on 121 and going to use that to renovate their property downtown. So they're going to stay down here with us, and I'm glad for that. So anyway, I just think that's a great compliment about our church, and we find that over and over again. One of the things, the one thing that has not grown that we've seen over the last year or so was the fall into missions, and it was a little less than what we had in the fall into missions and the spring into missions before. It's not spring in, yeah, it's spring into missions. That it was about 85 people, where we've been having a little over 100, and so it was a little smaller, but there were a lot of people out of town and so forth. So anyway, that's just about the only thing that hadn't grown larger in the mission area. Now, the thing that I think that we are struggling with most, and that is the attendance that we've had in worship. And we continue to find that every time we seem like we're going to make a jump, we're not quite there yet. Something else happens as much as, like, we'll have a really big 8:30 service, and then we'll be setting up chairs at 9 o'clock, and then we'll have a pretty good crowd at 9:45, and then 11's down. Or it's one of the services all the time. It's just, it's just crazy. So we are actually down about 100 people from an average from 2013 to 2014. There's all sorts of explanations. None of them are good enough. We are working really hard at worship attendance. Staff is working really hard at worship services and sermons and music and all of that kind of stuff. And I do think that the services have been about as good as what we can do. Hopefully. I really think they've been very good services and well received, and people give a lot of good comments about them. But it is frustrating for us to see that there's not a lot of movement in attendance. Now we've at least solidified. We're not going down anymore. We're beginning to see a little bit of a turn, and we're seeing it at 9 o'clock, particularly. Those of you who are 9 o'clockers, we have grown in that service quite a bit, and I think there's a day that we will be out of room in that service, and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do then. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. It is nice to have one place where you go and you go, man, we're running out of space. That's nice. But the CLC closing, the change of the services happening at the same time, the continued kind of grief that we have, and Ed, you tell them your story. Well,
Which one, John?
Well, yeah, never mind. Well, we just continue to have people tell us that it's really difficult for them to worship because every time they come into the sanctuary or whatever, they see Ken, and it's still, that's still going on in the congregation, and we do understand that generally in congregations. Well, generally in grief experiences, there's a 7-year period of time that you're dealing with that kind of grief, and we just have to understand that that's still going on. I want you to know that the staff doesn't sit around and say, well, that's the reason that this is, we just keep working harder and harder to try to make sure that we're doing the very best we can do to get folks here. One of the things that Cindy Ryan has been doing as her work with evangelism and those kinds of things. And by the way, we have a lot of good plans for 2015 in that. But she has been. We have a volunteer who calls people who've not been in worship for a number of Sundays in a row, and so he calls, and he did this well, he calls pretty regularly, but the one that I'm going to talk about was a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, and he called 10 families. We're not getting anything of, oh, I'm moving to a new church, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. It's just, well, we're going to the lake house, or we've been, such and such. But 4 of the 10 families that he called this one week, that they were in soccer on Sundays. And there's
I wasn't a part of the phone call, but that's a huge issue, soccer and baseball and sports.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that we're looking at, since we've suspended services at Heritage, looking at starting a Friday night service, a Saturday night service, a Sunday night service, or sometime other than a Sunday morning service. So we're going to look at that out of Compass Team coming up, so we'll see. I thought Steve had a great place for us to do this at another location, but anyway, I'm still blaming you.
Yeah,
it's really all your fault.
Okay.
No,
it's still not dead. It could actually happen.
Well, see, there you go. See, you're just going to get me excited all over again. We do have options that keep coming up that we need to just keep watching and see what we might be able to do. But we do have some things that are interesting challenges for us. And one of those things was when we stopped CLC, we decided that we were going to start a preschool back as quickly as we could. We wanted to get the plans in place and so forth. So we did that. The preschool task force has found that we really don't have a place to hold the preschool, because once we moved out of here, we will not be able to get the certifications that we need to be able to have it in the building again, because we were grandfathered under so many different, we couldn't get ADA, we couldn't get all the different kinds of things that we need as far as, what's the word?
Codes.
Huh?
Codes.
Codes, thank you. So we got to a certain point, we knew kind of what we wanted, we were ready to hire somebody to come in and consult with us, and then we just realized that the people that we had invited to come in to consult with us said, you don't have any place to hold it. So the other thing is, if we do what we're looking at over here, we might get started on it, have it start, and then have to move it or stop it while we're building. So we need to decide first about building to decide when we can start, where we can start, what we can do. So that one's kind of on hold for a while. We are still talking to the school district about some partnerships that we might do with them, so we'll continue that. The other was the Heritage Task Force, and as I said, they've decided to suspend worship there for a while at least. Rick did a good job while he was the connecting pastor over there, but as soon as Lewis left and we didn't have a full-time pastor that was theirs, a lot of the leadership just said, that's not what we're here for. And we were losing, and I told them these things, we were losing about $20,000 to $25,000 a quarter compared to what we were receiving and giving from that campus compared to what it was costing us. And so we had to make some changes. But I was real disappointed in the leadership of the previous Heritage United Methodist Church that just pretty well bailed on that. And one of the stories that I've told you guys before, but I'll tell you again, is I realized what a difficult task this was going to be when Jenny Davidson and I went over there to talk to the folks at the Heritage Campus about the youth minister when Peyton was leaving, and he was going to get married and move to Corsicana, and so we went over and we said, we're going to get a new person, but it's going to take us about a month, and we need 4 Sunday school teachers for this month, and 1 person to take each Sunday. And I had about 10 or 12 families there, and I couldn't get 1 volunteer. And that's kind of the way it was. There wasn't a lot of passion about ministry any longer in the congregation. I didn't see them doing things outside of themselves. It was pretty much, we'll be here at worship, worshiping the way we want to worship, and we're fine if you pay for it. So it just, we tried it. I'm afraid that the reason that church was not doing well when we absorbed them kept on, and we had hoped our DNA would affect their DNA, but their DNA trumped our DNA, and so anyway, that's and I really do not count that as something for me to be proud of as senior pastor. It's just, I just think that was the best decision we could make at the time. So hopefully we'll be able to use that in other ways and doing some of the things that we've talked with Connect about mentoring and so forth. That building is so restrictive, and that's one of our problems. Is that I was talking to Gary Lindley the other day, who's the guy in the conference that does the new church starts, and he was asking me. He said, maybe we ought to do a new church start at the old Heritage campus. I said, have you ever been in that church? He said, no, I haven't. And he said, how many does it hold? And I said, about 80. And he went, really? Is it that small? And I said, yeah. And I said, and it looks like your grandmother's den. And it's just not conducive to worship. It's not. You have 2 little bitty bathrooms. You have how many classrooms, Rick?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 4, 5 counting a nursery room.
Yeah, and they're little bitty. They're small rooms.
Then your portables. There's 2 usable rooms and 1 portable.
And so if we're really going to do anything major out of that campus, we're just going to have to bulldoze that building and start over again. I mean, that's the truth. So we'll see where we go, or Steve comes up with something better that we can do something with. Get to work. So
just explain a little bit of what
that was.
Yeah, what happened. Yeah.
You're the man. Tell me.
You're the one that brought it up, John. that land that Heritage sits on is in the Grapevine College School District, and there's a huge building boom now for residential. And there was a building that was available on 121 right next to the high school that we looked at putting under contract and perhaps swapping that land, that the Heritage campus, for that building, which was about the same amount of acreage. It's the old Home Depot building. But there was one of the issues was it's deed restricted against mass gatherings. Due to parking.
We could tell them we wouldn't have very many people.
When you said
it's really low in our church.
Families, I thought, well, that's why it might actually happen. Yeah. And that didn't work out, and then they put it under contract with somebody else who's got a really bad idea for it, and I don't think it's going to fly. That's why I said it's not. It's one of those
not
things.
Totally dead.
It's real estate. If you don't like it, wait a year.
Yeah. Well, and what was really funny was the architect that we ended up hiring for our master plan. I took him over there to show him the Home Depot landscape company that is sitting over there. And he said, wait a minute, this is a Home Depot landscape company. I said, yeah. He said, I just redid one of these for a church over in Louisville. So we drove over and looked at the one. It's really cool. So, I mean, there are options that we just need to keep watching and see what happens. So that was 2 of the 3 task forces. The 3rd task force that we were working with was the building team. And the building team was established because we had the opportunity to maybe buy the building next door. That's the Senior Citizen Center, Senior Activity Center, and we didn't know. First of all, if it became available, did we want it? If it did, how would we pay for it? All those kinds of things. And so we pulled a team of people together, and it's been really a good team. And so they started working on it. They looked at 6 different architectural groups. They interviewed 3. They hired 1. That group now has been putting together a master plan for us to give us a direction to go. We have a meeting tomorrow night with the architect, and he's going to kind of take the next steps after all of what I show you tonight. About phasing and what's possible and so forth. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But but this is a group that has worked with churches. That's all they do. They just build churches. It's BBA Architects. Hardy Brown is the primary now, and he is or the principal, and he's the third generation of architects in this firm. His grandfather was, his father was, he is, and now his son's joining the firm. So, so they graded us on a 10 different things, as they do every other church when they go in and do their master plan. We graded the lowest of any church that they'd ever graded in these 3 generations. And they do it on things like signage for the church, how easy is it to get around and get in, you know, do people feel comfortable when they get in there, how close is the nursery to the worship space, all those kinds of things. And obviously we don't do that. We don't have a building that's really easily maneuvered. I've told the story about Susie Bird, who came. She's a candidate for ministry, and she came to have lunch with me, and so I told her how to get here and get in the office and so forth. So she drove and parked in the Church Street parking lot. I told her to come down the tunnel. Well, she looked down the tunnel and she said, "No, surely that's not it." And then walked on, went over to what we call the sacrificial steps that go up into the Family Life Center. And so she risked her life getting up into there, and then got on the second floor. Well, she couldn't find the offices on the second floor, and then came down the ramp and was over here, and finally somebody grabbed her and said, "No, they're over here," took her over, took her down the stairs, went into the office, and then she was directed to my office. But I mean, you know, that's like 45 minutes later, so that was a little bit of exaggeration. But it really is difficult to get around this church. And if you're a first-time visitor, it is really difficult. And that's one of the things that Hardy said to us was, imagine a young couple with 2 kids that have not gone to church since they've been married, and now the kids are coming along, and they want to get back into church, and so they make the decision. This Sunday they're going to go to church. Well, they get up, and the kids are hard to get dressed, and they're not used to getting going on Sunday morning, and so they're slow moving. They finally get in the car. Nobody's all that happy in the car anyway, and that's the way we get all you guys to come to church. But they come in and they go to where they think the worship service is, but we do have a worship service there, just not at that hour. So then they're directed over to where the worship service at that particular hour is, and then they find out, but you got to take your kids to the nursery, and it's across campus, and so by that time they're ready to go to Starbucks and have coffee. So that's one of the things that Hardy Brown said was, I am amazed at how well this church is doing, because you really are dragging a really difficult building to work in ministry. And he said to have a church as vital as it is says a whole lot about this congregation. And I think he's right. I think that that's very true. So we wanted to try to get through some of those problems. Well, the first thing that actually all 6 mentioned to us, but particularly the 3 that we interviewed, said you'd be crazy to buy that building over there because that's going to put you across another street. You don't need to be spreading out. You need to be consolidating more. You need to get everything under one roof. You need to have a front door where people know that they're going in. You need to have everything much more easily accessible. And so that's what this plan has been working on. And I'm going to get this is your job, Ed. Come on. This is what the lay leader does. This along with about 8,000 meetings, right? And and covering for the minister when he messes up. So this is a smaller picture of this, and it will help you see things a little more clearly, maybe. Let me tell you what's on here so that you can get a perspective of what's here. This is the chapel right here, so it's still here. This is the Family Life Center, so it's still here. This is the sanctuary, it's still there, and everything else is new. Everything else is either gone or newly built. The things that aren't here are, this is where the 8 apartments are. Those would be gone. This over here is where the Forbes house and the thrift shop are. I'm guessing that we would sell both of those to citizens so that they can make them residences rather than offices. or a shop. That's what the city would like for us to do. They're trying to get as many of the historic homes in residents' hands as they possibly can. So that would be a nice, the city would see that as a nice cooperative thing for us to do. From my perspective, those buildings are going to cost us a lot of money over the years to keep up. The thrift shop's already fallen down. The repairs to that and to the Forbes House would have to be done under the guidance of the Historic Society, and it would be very expensive just to do those kinds of things. So, I just think that they have fulfilled their usefulness, and this may be the time for us to move away from those. The other thing that's not here is where you're sitting and this whole hallway. This would go. The chapel would be still here, but the rest of it would be gone. And the reason that this looks like it doesn't connect is because you're looking here at the first floor, and there's a second floor. This actually goes into the second floor. The chapel goes into the second floor. One of the biggest problems that we have is the different levels that we have to build. This is if you go out and stand about where at the end of the end of the tunnel, where the sanctuary is and the opening to this building, if you look there, you'll see how many different levels we have. And to pull all of that together when you're trying to get it all under one roof is really difficult. And so that's one of the challenges that's there for us. So this would be going into the second floor, which would be the adult classrooms, and you're not seeing all of those. One of the things that's good about that is you'd want older adult classrooms to be close to the chapel so that you could have older adults in a Sunday school class and easily accessible into the chapel. You've got the same thing over here. If you look in the sanctuary, there's two new classrooms there that would be available for older Sunday school classrooms, so that people could park, go to Sunday school, go to worship, and not have long distances to be walking. The other thing that would be right out that door of the chapel would be another nursery, so that you could have a nursery right next to the chapel, as well as you have the nursery over here for the sanctuary and for this worship space that I'll talk about here in a few moments. The other things that are in here that are the major additions that we talked about, first of all, is the Grand Mall area. This area right here, this is what gives us our front doors. Because one of the things we realized was we really have two main entrance areas. You have all the parking that's down toward Scribner and Ball, and you have all the parking that's over on the Church Street and in the Wilhoit's parking area. So we need to have a main entrance here and a main entrance there, and these would be obvious, with big awnings and so forth that say First United Methodist Church and that kind of thing. So in this area, and this is a huge area, if you will, again, when you're out there, go stand in that same spot. Look where the overhang, along the side of the sanctuary. Just stand there and look across and see how big this room would be. So look across there. What you'll see is that's where the chiller unit is. That would be totally gone. And that's a great thing because the chiller unit is about to croak, and it's put together with duct tape and prayer, basically. And the steps would be gone, and so you can kind of get an idea. The sacrificial steps. You can get a perspective of how large a space that is, and that's what a lot of really churches that are built now have, these large gathering areas, and this would have seating areas all through it where you'd have a grouping of, say, a couple of couches and some chairs and tables where you would gather for conversations, and there would be several of those This is an indoor play area for the children and the outdoor play area. All of this is glass, and so you would have an area where people could have coffee and maybe a light lunch or something, because you've got a little coffee shop kind of cafe thing here. There's also a little courtyard here that you could eat outside if you wanted to. This is the information center, which would be much larger than what we have anywhere now. So you have a lot of what we've needed in this church, where you have one gathering spot, and we wouldn't be all over. That's basically where everybody would come in and out of the building, so you would see each other much more. One of the things that just made me think about that I had not said before is that just realize that because we're 150 years old, that's really the reasons we're so spread out. I mean, you had this, and then you got some more land, and so you built that, and then it's just been one of those things as it's come along and it's been available. The church did it, and it's great, because I don't know what. Do you know, Trudy, at all how many acres this church was originally? No, but I mean it was a much smaller tract of land that we had, and then the ability as the ability came up where we could buy more and more, we bought from church, well, actually from the back of Wilhoit's all the way to Ball Street. So we have a large expanse of land there, but the other thing that's happened is that we have a lot of old buildings, and old buildings cost more money, and they're inefficient, and so we're spending more and more money on utilities. We're spending more and more money on repairs, and I can tell you, when that chiller unit goes, that means this whole building has no air or no heat. So we would have to totally redo the air and heat, and I mean, it's a ton of money. So there's money that's going to be spent on the church over the years, whether we do this or we do other things. And so we need to understand that and see what's the best way to attack that. And so just, this, I can tell you, this is our most expensive option, as you'll hear tonight. But the other, I mean, it's not like we're not going to spend money. That's my point. Also, what we have, youth area. One of the things, I believe, honestly, that one of the reasons we're down in attendance is youth ministry and children's ministry. And we've seen those decline. That's why we've made some changes in staff. That's got to shore up before we start seeing the change in attendance again. So I do think we made a great hire in Patty. If anybody has more energy than that woman, if any two people have as much energy as she does, I'd be surprised. She's doing a very good job. She's very perceptive. She's making good decisions, and I'm really pleased with what I'm seeing, and other staff members are saying the same, and church members are saying the same. We've just got to get people who've been kind of out on the sidelines looking in, saying, well, when they get a good children's person or a good youth person, then I'll be back. We just need to get them to get to know her, get to know Michael, get to, all of that stuff. So where we had Nathan and we had Jenny, now we have her, and then she's got Michael, and she's hiring another person for youth and children that's going to do the tween area, and then she's got Cindy full time. So we've got really more people doing what we were doing before, but in a little different format. And so that sometimes when you have a couple of people leave the staff, you're able to do things a little differently, and so we wanted to take that opportunity, and that's what we did. And by the way, I don't want to forget this either. There are not two better people in all the world than Nathan Furman and Jenny Davidson. They are just the best. And the thing that I feel really good about is that in them leaving, that was done with great compassion, great kindness. They both appreciate the way that they were treated, and that they've both said, this is really what I needed. I needed to find a new challenge. I needed that next step where I could do the things that I needed to be doing. It was just more comfortable for me to stay here, and thank you. And so they've been great about that, both. Jenny has already come back and visited with us, and so I tell people all the time, I've got to be able to sleep at night when we make hard decisions, when I make hard decisions. And so I can tell you I feel really good about both of those changes and the way that it was done. I hope you do too. So, youth. We have all the youth classes there now. They're all, instead of scattered all around the church. To give you a perspective, this is 3 times larger than the hub is now. It would really give us a significant room in which the kids could be and play and have the kinds of things that you would want to have, computers where you could do homework, where you could have video games, where you can do all of the stuff that you would want to do in there. This is, like I said, the first floor, where the second floor is adults. That also goes into around this is the first floor of the Families Alive Center, but remember there's a second floor there. We would be talking about renovating this and renovating that, and that in this area we would put walls where, how you have the classrooms that are in there with the big room in the middle and you can't really do anything. If there's something big on the gym floor, you really can't do anything in those classrooms because it's just too noisy. And let me tell you, if you need to come to my office sometime and see what it's like. You can hear everything that goes on everywhere in my office. And when I had a person in there today, and it's a little disconcerting to them as they are telling me things that they want to have private and confidential, that they can hear what's going on in the 3 offices around them. And so they go, if I'm hearing them, I bet they can hear me. And that's just something we got to fix. I mean, we've got to give people confidence that they can speak to the pastors in ways that are helpful. So that would also give us the ability to put all the staff in one place, which is over here. Now, and this is another good example of what it's like to work with all these levels. This is where that berm comes up, where it goes up to the parking lot. So I mean, it's kind of squashed in there, and that's about the only space we got to put that. But it still would function, would be away from the stained glass that's there and so forth. This is the children's area over here. This would be where the preschool is and where the Sunday school classes would be as well. There would be entrances for parents there and there. It would be a place that we could secure. It would be a place we could lock down. All of those things we can't do in this building over here. And that was one of the big concerns with our building before. We were going to have to put money into security, and there's no real way to fully secure that building and to lock it down. There's just too many entrances into the building. And you guys remember when we had our fugitive running around, and we had the whole church locked down, because that was the only way we could lock the preschool down. So that's another thing that it would enable. What am I forgetting, you guys that have heard me 107 times now?
The
Thank you. Contemporary worship space is right here. As I said, that's one of our faster growing services. That would hold 350 people. It's upstairs. I mean, it's got a balcony around it. And so you could do multiple things there. It wouldn't just be for contemporary service. You could do theater there. You could do all sorts of things in that room. So you have a balcony that comes around here. It would be totally dark. In other words, there's no light from the outside, no stained glass, any of that stuff, because you want, in a contemporary space, you want to be able to make it black and then light and then do all sorts of things with lighting. You'd have a lot of ability as far as video and so forth. So that would give us that capability as well. Okay, now what have I forgotten? If I forgot it, you forgot it too, right?
The play areas.
The play areas are all over here. You got indoor here and you've got outdoor over here. And so actually this is where they are, this is where the playground is right now. So the children's area would go where the playground is, and it would move.
And that's a one-story.
Yes,
there.
this is one
That's
story
one
here.
story.
Right, right.
Do we get a loading dock?
Okay, thank you, good question. The answer is yes, but not there, because if we get rid of the thrift shop, we're not getting rid of the thrift shop. If we're getting rid of the thrift shop building, we still want to do the thrift shop ministry. So we've talked about, and by the way, we have thrift shop people on the task force, we have children's people on the task force, we have youth people on the task force, all these areas we really wanted to try to accomplish. We also have several architects. But what we would do is the primary plan, and I think what would actually probably work better, would be where the pumpkin patch was, that we would build a building over there. That would be the mission center. And we would take the thrift shop and put it there. We would give them more space. We would give them more storage space, which they both need both. And then we would have Feed Our Kids. We would have weekend food. We would have a loading dock. We would have all of that stuff there in that building. We would have we might have. I mean, we're not going to kick Justice for Our Neighbors out. I mean, but they're a different 501c3 that, you know, we would give them the option to move in there. There would be space for them to move in there, but they may want to move somewhere else. I don't think they would, but I just can't tell you that they're going to move in there. You know, we wouldn't build it for them necessarily. We would build it for the missions that we want to have, and we would have a space for them if they would like to move into it. That's one option. The other option is to buy this building over here and put the mission center over there. The problem I see is we already own that land, and we can build a building on that land for a lot less money than that's probably going to cost us, because you're buying land in the historic district that's going to cost a whole lot more money. We still don't have a figure from the city. I'm guessing that that's going to cost like $750,000. That's what the architect guessed or estimated, and I'm guessing this is more in the $3 million range. So I'm, we don't know any of that, but I think that's going to be our simpler, cheaper route. And it also still gives you, the thrift shop really likes that. They like both of these ideas. They would go either way. They want security because they're worried that, you have a lot of volunteer help that's in there. They don't want a place that's going to be in a location where people could be causing trouble. So they want it open and visible. They also want the visibility from Ball Street. They like that, or the visibility over here. If you had a shop, you'd want to have it where it's visible. People can see the place and so forth. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at there. Now, there may be some things that I'm not thinking of. So do you all have any questions? Let me just stop and take a breath, and I'll tell you how much it's going to cost us if we go that route. Okay, everyone wants to know what it costs. Okay, we can get this for the mere price of $22 million. And so we're not going to build it tomorrow, but I don't want you to think, oh, well, we can't do that, $22 million, we can't do that, because you would do this in phases. And we have a couple of challenges in front of us. I mean, if we decide to go this direction, you can't start it and not finish it, because you're tearing stuff down to build stuff in. So when we decide to do it, we've got to be committed as a church to do it, and to finish it in however long it takes. I don't think you could do it in less than 15 years. I think it might be 20 years, because you're going to have to do it piece by piece. Think about doing a capital campaign for 3 years, building phase 1, finishing paying for it so that you don't go into debt, be ready for phase 2 right after you finish. So you're moving out of one capital campaign into another capital campaign and moving forward through 5 or 6 maybe. of those phases. But you cannot do it. If we were to say, well, let's do a big one first, well, if you do the big one and we can't pay for it all, which I think would be an iffy deal, I think you've got to keep it into a range where the church can pay for it so that you don't go into more debt, because if you go into debt, you can't do your next phase. All right? So we still owe $2.5 million on the debt from the sanctuary. We'll continue to whittle that down. Hopefully by the time we start, it'll be down lower than that. But I do think I think it's manageable, but I do think that the church has to really make the decision, this is the direction we want to go, because you can't knock down the children's wing and then not go to the phase where you're going to build the children's wing. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you've got to have the room, and it's going to be a mess for 15 or 20 years. If you're knocking something down and building something and then knocking something else down and building something else, it's just going to be a constant thing for a while. And so we would have to be very flexible. You know, worship times would have to be flexible. Sunday school classes moving here and there would have to be flexible. They're just, I mean, you know, I don't think we want to make this look any prettier than it really is. I want everybody to really understand what the challenges are, because honestly, I'm going to be retired in the middle of there somewhere, and this is a church decision. This isn't the John Mollet decision. This is just, where we think we need to go as a congregation. Let me tell you what it does for the church. Number one is it puts the church back into a position where people who are looking for churches with the things that they expect in a church. We live in a very consumer society, and people, particularly with youth and children, are looking for buildings that have the kind of things they want their children to have. One of the things in preschools, you got to have technology. You've got to have the safety kind of stuff. All of those kinds of things. That's what parents are looking for. And so if we've got 20 churches that were built in the last 5 or 10 years that have all these new buildings, and they look at that compared to what we can offer with a building that was built in the 60s, it's just not, it's not apples and apples. So it gives us, and I don't want to use the word competitive, but I think you'll understand what I mean. It gives us that competitive edge with those who are really looking for a church. Gives us something to offer people to say, this is the way that we are going to be in ministry in the future. It gives us the 2 front doors. It gives us the worship space that people are looking for for contemporary worship instead of having them on a gym floor. It gives us the youth space that's crucial right now and in the future, as well as the children's space. It gives us office space that enables the office team to all be together and really function in a better way where you can talk to each other rather than be scattered all around the church building. It's much more accessible. Once you're in one of these 2 doors, you can go anywhere in the church. And so it would be much easier to get around and find your way around. All right, so I'll take another breath. What questions or comments or?
So what would be the first phase?
We don't know. That's what we'll find out tomorrow night. Hardy is going to be here tomorrow to give us his first shot at the way we might phase this out. Yeah.
After that discussion, what's your thought on a timing of when decisions be made and things would take place?
I would hope that we would, if we decide to go this route, I would hope we would start a capital campaign. And even if we decide not to go this route, I think we still need to have a capital campaign to get ready for the expenses that we're going to have otherwise, and to decide how we're going to renovate some things. Because we've got to renovate the chapel. We've got to renovate the Family Life Center. Those things are just getting out of repair to an extent that it's going to affect our ministry. And I don't want you to think for a minute that my focus is on us. It's a focus on how do we most effectively do ministry out of this place. Because our ministry and missions all starts here. And it's really important that this is not going to, I don't want this to be the floosy, showcasey kind of thing. I want this to be, I want it to be a functioning place where we can really do ministry, but continue to do the missional ministries that's the backbone of this church. I would love to see us start a capital campaign in 2016, which is our 150th year. That just seems to make sense to me, that we start our future as we celebrate 150 years of ministry out of this location, and that we would pretty quickly, as soon as we get that going and find out how the campaign's going, we would be ready to start hammering and tearing and all of that kind of stuff. That we'd be ready to go. Yeah, Steve.
Were there any other land use schematics done besides the one we're seeing there?
I wish Craig were here. The answer is, do you know?
There were different drafts that had been presented earlier on, so this is the product that came from earlier variations.
And there was, I guess I attended some of those, there was a lot of discussion with the different ministry groups of what they wanted, and they pulled all that together with this overall philosophy of getting everybody closer together and building a more community environment with that. So there was a lot of stuff before he drew that,
Right.
I think.
And there's
Based on that, what are the sacred cows that came out of those meetings?
It's funny.
The chapel.
The chapel was the only one, and there was a lot of discussion, and it was not unanimous to keep the chapel. But we just felt like to get rid of a really a great place to get married, that if you took that out, we really wouldn't have a place to do weddings, because that's the right size for a wedding chapel. We're not getting nearly as many weddings these days, primarily because if you go in there and look at it, it's just not. Look at the carpet. Look at the walls. They're scratched up. They're beat up. The doors that go back to the sacristy and what's going to be the prayer room, they're just beat to shreds.
And the metal and the stained glass is deteriorating.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and so this $22 million, by the way, includes renovation for these spaces as well, and it's also including furnishings and so forth. Now, I do think it's in today's dollars and not 15 years down the road dollars, but it does hold a lot of those things in there. So, does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And by the way, anybody's welcome to come to building team meetings. If you want to come in and sit and watch what's going on. We've been meeting for a year, and a lot of hard work has been going on in there.
Steve, in some of those meetings, there were hard discussions about, let's just tear down the Family Life Center, the CLC wing, the Founders Chapel, let's just take it all down. And, there were some hard discussions around that. Right. Because in some cases, some of the thought processes were very tempting.
Really one of the hardest things for me to tear down are the apartments. We've got 8 apartments there. 4 of them we rent out for full rent, so that helps subsidize the rent of the other 4. But that building's getting old. It's getting to the point where it's not going to be a great place to live unless we put a lot of money into it. And so, maybe we do that in another location somewhere on the property. We could see. Okay, so, yes, ma'am?
What are there places or spaces on this that are optional? I mean, obviously there are some that are very necessary. Which of these are optional?
Well, there's a lot of, one of the things, you're looking at names on rooms that may not be names on rooms, okay? I mean, we really, what he did was he put rooms where we needed to know we had enough rooms for everything that we've got, plus things that we would need down the road. So there are some of those. This is not building a building for a 6,000 member church. All right, I don't think this church will ever be a 6,000 member church. We are built out in Grapevine, basically. We still have room to grow out of Colleyville. We still have room to grow out of Flower Mound. We still have room to grow out of Coppell. We still have room to grow out of Euless, and we do have people coming from those areas. But that's where our growth is going to come from further and further out as years go on. So we will grow. I do think that there's a capability that this church could be a 4,000 member church or a 3,500 member church. But I don't think we need to build. What I'm saying is we don't need to build so many rooms that we would have to do that. The other thing is that when you get to that size, you have multiple Sunday school hours. So you just double up your rooms so that you have 2 Sunday school hours for children and 2 Sunday school hours for adults and so forth. But, for instance, we've got Music Garden here. Well, we don't know if Music Garden's still going to be going. We don't, I was talking about Justice for Our Neighbors. That was another thing with that. But so we know that we can fit everybody in, plus have some extra rooms along with that. But remember, when we lose this, we're losing 5 classrooms, right, Trudy? 5? 5 classrooms.
Over there.
Yeah. So when they move out of there, and we have to move out of there, we're already 5 classrooms down. Did that answer? Kind of? Sort of? Kind of. I mean, I can't point to you like, you've got 2 4th grade rooms. I don't know. Do we use 2 4th grade rooms? I'm not real sure. I guess, I don't know.
Those kids aren't even born yet.
Yeah, you got 2 5th grade rooms. So how, see what I mean? Even though there are room names on there, that may not be how those rooms are used. We just know the number of rooms that we really need and spaces and sizes and all of that. The good thing is all of these rooms are bigger than what we got. If you walk down there and look at our rooms here, those are small rooms compared to what this would be.
If I could just leave you with a comment. I came from...
You don't have to leave. You can stay.
Well, no, I'm going to stay. But, I mean, if I could just comment on something. I came from another Methodist church to the west of us that...
Can't imagine what that would be.
I know. And I'm not trying to bash it.
Sure.
But I left there for a reason, and so I'm gonna talk about why I left there and came here, because and it was because of some of this. They grew quickly and added on and had a historic little chapel and had the offices. They did a lot of what we're talking here, and they did do it kind of seamlessly, without a whole lot of destruction and interruption. I don't know how, but in the years that we were there, it was amazing to walk in, miss a couple of Sundays, walk in and go, oh wow, that's totally different. And so I don't know how they did that, but anyway, that church seemed like they were always asking for more money. They were always having another capital campaign. They were always wanting the latest and the greatest and the biggest and the best.
Right.
And they got so big that, and they seemed to be so focused on that I didn't feel like there was anything that involved missions or anything that I wanted to be a part of and my family wanted to be a part of. And the spaces were so big that you didn't, even though you were under one roof pretty much, you didn't always see people that you knew.
And are you? And I'm guessing you're saying what other people have told me, that it's just not a warm feel.
Yes, because it was more about being bigger and better, and look at this fancy thing, and look at this, and we want, giant concerts here, and we want this and that, and they lost what I was looking for, in that it was what I was looking for is a family, community church that reaches out to others, has wonderful missions programs, everything that we have found here. And I think while our buildings and our spaces are very antiquated and need repair and need updating, and we need to expand, and so much of this would be wonderful and is going to be wonderful, just be mindful of always having to ask for more money,
Right.
and trying to be, don't have that same perception that they
Yeah. No, I agree.
Don't lose sight of what makes this church wonderful, and it is the people. And yeah, the big toys, the electronics, my mom called some of the churches Six Flags Over Jesus with the children's programs.
Right.
I mean, it's true.
That's right.
And I love that saying, because that's not what we have here, and we need a compromise. I don't want this to be Six Flags Over Jesus, but we need something better than what we have now.
Right.
So that's my thought. Just keep it in mind and try to meet somewhere in the middle.
I couldn't agree with you more, but let me put it this way. That is, I would say, first of all, that's who this church is. But that's what you guys have to do. I mean, you don't look at me and say, John, you need to make sure you keep this church that way, because I'm not going to be here. That's who you have to be. This is your church. This is what you want to make it. I don't care who the pastor is or pastors. This is who you are. This is who you want to be, and you have to make sure you're going to do that. And I would say, absolutely, we should not do a capital campaign without mission involved in that capital campaign, and without a way in which we can take care of the buildings as they grow older out of that campaign. So not all the money would be going to the building. It would be going to those things as well, just like you did in your capital campaign for debt reduction. So I'm right with you. Yeah.
When the sanctuary was built here, there were plans for those large concerts and making it kind of the big destination point, and it didn't work. And it frustrated a lot of people on some things. And then we did start to develop the ministry mile and work with the villages, and that spark caught on. Mm-hmm. And I think we've had so many people now involved with that as a spark and what this church is about. I think it is a lesson we learned, and I'm hoping that we never forget.
Well, just think it. I think this church has a complex. I think we have a Tim complex. And we're afraid that we're going to go back to the Tim years. And that if we do anything in this church that even looks like something Tim did, people freak out like, oh my gosh, we're going to be Tim again. You can't let that happen. You as a church let Tim do things that you ought not to let pastors do.
We weren't here.
No, I understand that. Okay. You came in the good years. Yeah, you made it what it is today. Yeah. Huh?
We came
because he left. I mean, I understand.
You were in the house that Tim built anyway.
I mean, Trudy and Rick will vouch for me. I can't tell you how many times we hear, oh, wait a minute, no, we can't do that because, that's the way it was when Tim was here. So, I'm serious about this. I think this church is 180 degrees different than what it was when Tim was here. I don't think you would ever allow that to happen again, but you should not ever allow a pastor to have that much control over a church, over your church. This is your church, not his or her church. It's yours. You keep it. You run it. This is what God's directing you. You know how it's worked well, and just don't do it. I mean, y'all are mean enough, I know. You can do that.
Well, one of the questions you've had in other sessions is how does that process go to approve that? And I think that's important in this
Sure.
line of thinking.
Yeah.
It isn't,
Go ahead.
well, as you said, it isn't, oh, the committee decides that's what we're going to do and you announce it.
Yeah. No.
You
This
have a
would
vote of
be-
the whole membership.
This would go in front of the whole congregation. We wouldn't have even a church conference where we make a decision. We'd have a church-wide conference where we make a decision. This is the kind of thing that you cannot do with half of the congregation saying, oh, I think that's a good idea. I mean, everybody has to be on board. And even, as I've said before, even if they're given $1.50, to it, everybody has to give what they can do financially and just emotionally and with the spirit, because it is going to be taxing. It's going to be taxing on the congregation. Okay, so we're getting kind of to the point where we need to move forward. Are there any other questions with that? All right, so where are we with our campaign? And Trudy probably has more. I know we have more pledges than this but let me just give you where we were. We're at 324 pledges in. We have a goal of 400. I think we'll make the 400 pledges. Last year, pledges came in through March. Hopefully, we'll get most of them in before that. But we had several in the plate on Sunday, and some folks did that online. Of those 324 pledges, 251 of those increased their pledge. So 77% of the pledges that have been given are increases. That's huge. That is an amazing thing. So far out of even though we had a huge stretch goal of $2 million, we're at just under $1.6 million, at $1,588,500. I don't think we'll make the $2 million goal. I do think we'll make the 400 pledge goal. I'm just elated over how many increased pledges there are, because that just shows that's that part of the turnaround that I think that we're just beginning to see. Ed?
How does that $1.6 million compare to where we were in the prior year?
I'll let Trudy answer that one.
We were at $390 something at this same time last year.
So
You're taking my intro.
So
Finance
Jeff,
chair.
That's
my intro.
Jeff is the finance chair. He's going to tell you a little bit about that.
Well, that's how I've started this off, is that I've been 3 years on the finance committee, and I've been on the stewardship committee before. And the campaign this year is a couple of $100,000 ahead. And for given the time we're at here in early December than it was last year. And I think that's a big turnaround. And our budget overall is $2.4 million. Pledges don't meet our budget. We have about 74% of our income, if you look back at the history, is pledge giving. 25% is unpledged, and then there's some other fees and stuff we get for renting buildings and other gifts that come in. So pledging isn't everything, but of course it's the big thing that we use to put a budget together, and there's kind of some historical factors that have been used, as I've learned, to arrive at budgets. At this time last year, we weren't near as far along, and we're looking at quite a lower number. So this is good. To me, and with the lower numbers we've had this year, it looks like, to me, a little bit of a rebound, a recommitment, and people coming back on board, and that's good. And that's going to help the committee next year in setting the annual budget. I don't anticipate, and I won't be the chair of it next year, I'm going off, but I wouldn't anticipate, from what I've seen or what we've seen, Dick, that the budget would go up from where we are today. But I think we're in better shape to meet it, because that's the other story here tonight, why I'm here tonight, is we're, much like last year at this time, We were a little bit behind on our budget, and we had these sort of meetings last year and talked about a gap and asked people to help close it, and they did. And we finished last year. Our budget was balanced. We had a $20,000, $18,000 excess, which we were able to put back into our reserves, because for the 3 years prior to that, we had been into our reserves to balance our budget. We had drawn those down. And so, and we accomplished that by extra giving last year and also cutting the budget and some of the reductions and stuff that have been done. This year, going into the final month, and I don't know if you have an updated number, but it was in the bulletin. We had a notice last week of did you know about where we stood with a $132,000 budget gap that we're asking people to give to if they can. Also realize that November and December are typically higher giving months. People catch up with their giving. I use an example myself where in my company part of my compensation is done with year-end bonuses. And so I don't pledge that. That's another thing about pledging. I don't pledge something I'm not sure I'm going to get. But then when it does come in, so there's extra giving we see at year end. But there is that gap, and so we're asking
So
people.
should we be praying for you to have a big...
You should. You should. And I'm afraid to say that because Trudy's over there like writing. Look for Jeff's check. I need to make sure about that. Because if I don't, she's going to call me. So we wanted to make sure you were aware of that. The other thing that helps, again, that we want to continue to get the message out with the church is if at all you can sign up in your giving for bank draft, or that makes it so much easier for the church. We go through a dip every summer. If you looked at the finances in August, it would scare you. And if you ever talk to somebody who's been on a finance team, there's a guy here been on the finance team 10 years ago. And it's like, August will scare you to death. You almost have to just look at the numbers and drink a cup of coffee because it rebounds from there. So if we can get things more rateable, it's helpful. We also have people who give through their credit card, and while we want people to do what makes sense for them, we do pay credit card fees. If you do that through your credit card, we usually have to pay 3% of that money to the credit card company. And that
Tens
adds
of
up,
thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it adds up to almost $20,000 a year we pay in credit card fees. So if at all you can not do that, we'd ask you to. The online bank draft setup is pretty convenient. I've switched to that a couple of years ago, and it's easy to renew every year. They have you renew every year. They don't draft it without your say-so. But it's pretty easy to have that done. So think about that as you can. And then the other thing I wanted to offer up is there any questions you might have about the church finances?
Tell them about the prepaid pledges.
Oh, yeah. Well, given the tax situation, that if some people look at their taxing situation and it makes sense for them from a tax standpoint to maybe move some deductions into this year for next year, and you can actually prepay pledges for next year if it makes sense for you. That's very helpful for us. This past summer, we had some people who did that, and so when giving was down in the summer months, we drew down on those prepaid pledges because they're accrued over there, and that, as Trudy said, kind of got us through some of those lean months when people are off on summer vacation.
We had about 50-something thousand?
Not quite 50.
Not quite $50,000.
So,
That was a big benefit to me last year. I didn't
Okay.
learn about it until I heard about it on the finance committee, so I double paid last year.
And I got our first one
there.
for 2015
Oh,
today.
good. So, any of those kind of things. If you have questions about that, Trudy or us, holler at us. We'd be happy to answer anything. Church finances are unique from my perspective. Having learned this, it's a lot of fixed costs. There's not a lot that we can change quickly. We can do things over time by reducing staff or scope or stuff, but really costs are very fixed and set up with people and buildings and electricity. It's not the paper and the pencils and the cups. That's not the major portion of the budget or the programming. The costs of the actual Sunday school once you get past the people stuff. And you have that with an income stream that is totally varied. It's all dependent upon the people pledging and stepping forward and giving. So it's a unique thing. Yes.
We have about $700,000 in money that people are giving that's earmarked for specific things like various missions. You know, I want to give $100,000 to Latvia, for example. And there's a lot of administration going expense to handle all of these, you know, $50 and $100 donations. So what we've started doing is taking a percentage of what people are giving for these dedicated gifts to handle some of the administrative costs.
If they,
We ask them to agree to that. We ask them.
we don't take it.
That's the point. If you give to some mission, that isn't budget. That's over here. Budget is the operations of the church.
Church never sees it.
If the church doesn't see it, and so what we've asked when we had these sessions last year was think about that when you're we don't want to impact your giving to something you feel called to do, but think about if you can give somewhere in the 5 to 10% range of that with that gift to the church budget, because we administer all those programs with staff and offices and stuff, but that it's somewhere in the $600,000 to $700,000 a year is other giving that you out there are saying, well, that's what we give, but it doesn't go to the budget, and that's great. That's the missional aspect of this church. So, but some people think that's all in the budget and runs through it. It doesn't. It goes to where it's supposed to go. Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
I did have a guy come in my office today. He said, John, my wife and I were out shopping yesterday for our kids, for our grandkids, and he said, we were buying a bunch of crap, and that's a quote. And he said, we're spending so much money, we have got to do something for the church. And so he said, he and she's Catholic. He comes here. And so he said, I tell you what, why don't you give $2,000 to yours, I'll give $2,000 to mine. He came in the office and he said, I love this place. This place means so much to me. It's been so much a part of my life. And I want to give $2,000 to the end of the year. And here's another $100 for the benevolence fund. And that, this, from my perspective, it's great to have that check. But for somebody to say, this church means that much to me and it's making a difference in my life, and that's what makes my day. And hopefully a lot of folks feel that way. We'll make up this last little bit in the last couple of weeks. And we do have big giving on Christmas Eve. We do have these are big receipt days, but we do need that extra amount to try to cover this $130-something thousand. So help us out if you can. I think that's everything unless you got questions. I don't know. I cannot do this I just can't do it in an hour. I can't talk fast enough.
I think this is the closest we've gotten. It's an hour and 18 minutes.
Okay. All right. So
that's good.
That's the camera talking. That's good. All right. Well, thank you guys. I really do understand it's not easy to get out on a Tuesday evening and get out in the cold and the fog and all that stuff, and I really do appreciate you guys doing it. This is I think a good way to continue to communicate, and you to communicate to me about what's going on and so forth. So we'll continue doing them, and you continue to let me know what we need to be doing better. Let me pray you into the night. Gracious God, we give you thanks that you are the light that guides us. Give us that light throughout this evening. Give us the rest.